Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing all of us here for this conference. Thank you for Jackie and Alliance for Life Ontario for all their hard work in organizing it. Thank you for the wonderful speakers that we've heard in the last 2 days. Thank you for Royce Dunn, the founder of Life Chain, whose manifestation takes place tomorrow around the world. And for David B. Wright, founder of 40 Days for Life. Thank you for all the people here. I know that many were invited, but here are the chosen. Thank you for allowing me to be with them. Amen. Amen. Alex Schadenberg is here. He got a visit the other night from the police. RCMP came to his door and said, "Where were you between 3 and 4? He said, "In kindergarten." The late, great Richard John Newhouse at a conference here in Toronto, Father Richard Newhouse, who was a founder of First Things magazine. He came to a conference, there were probably 500 people there, and he said, "It's wonderful to see all the young people here." And everybody cheered, especially the young people, especially the older people that thought, "Oh, thank God, now we can stop doing all this." But he said, "You older people, you're here for the duration. You're here until God calls you." They put the lid down and tighten the screws. So it's good to be here with all of you. My parents always told me to respect the elderly, and I look around and there aren't any, just me. But aside from that, when a newspaper report came out saying that I was retiring, a woman in my church saw me after a church service, and she said, "How does it feel to have wasted 40 years of your life?" So, I beg your pardon? She said, "How does it feel to have wasted 40 years of your life? You didn't stop the killing of the children before birth." I said, "Every day was a gift. Every day God gave me this gift to be able to go and do His work. I didn't expect that I was going to change things. Oh, maybe in the beginning I did. But as I get into it, I realized this was a battle between good and evil. And the more we see what's happening in society with the religious communities, with politics, we realize that, hey, the devil is at work. I remember a slogan back in the 60s on the bumpers of cars said, "Jesus is alive and hiding in Argentina." And it was because so many people were concerned about what was happening, they wondered where he was. Well, he's still where he always is. He's within the hearts of each and every one of us. And that's why it's such a joy. That's why it's such a gift to be able to do this work. And people say to me, "Well, why don't you just retire?" How do you retire if they're still killing babies? How do you retire when the government says we got to shut those pro-lifers up? We'll change the laws again. They started in the mid-'80s and said, okay, let's shut up the third party so they can't say what the issues are during the election. We'll tell them what the issues are. We don't want to listen to the grassroots telling us what the issues are. And so they were successful, the liberals and the conservatives working on that. We had an ally in those days. His name was Stephen Harper. And then when he became prime minister, he became one of our enemies trying to do what they were all doing, and they were successful. Then we had a prime minister that said no pro-lifers may run for the Liberal Party of Canada 3 years ago. But the NDP said it in the mid-'70s. No pro-lifer may run for the NDP. Now the Liberals have said it. And then they brought in the job attestation so that we couldn't hire summer interns to do pro-life work. And we had most of the church community supporting us until the new job attestation came in, and people from PEI called and said, "The bishop says it's all right to sign this." I said, "Yeah, well, therein lies the problem." I had been promised Pierre's son, Justin, would not receive Holy Communion in a Catholic church. And the next thing I see, there's a picture of him. And so I called, made an appointment with the papal nuncio in Ottawa, and I said, "What goes?" "Well, Jim, the bishops of Canada have decided to accompany him. I said, what, through the gates of hell?
Good for you.
And end of our meeting. Now we have Andrew Scheer. Andrew Scheer had a perfect voting record. And by the way, Justin Trudeau, a number of years ago, had said that he was pro-life. But when he accused Andrew Scheer of being pro-life, Andrew should have turned the tables on him and said, hey, wait a minute, 8 years ago you said you were pro-life. But he didn't do it. So here we have Andrew Scheer now, who had a perfect voting record, commenting in Quebec this week that he would not rescind Justin Trudeau's promise to third world countries to give billions of dollars for abortion. When it came up that the people were accusing him of bringing forward private members' bills and motions on abortion, all he had to say was what I sent Stephen Harper to say, which was, in a democratic society such as this, the way grassroots Canadians have their voices heard is through private members' bills and motions through their MP. And I support that. I may not support the individual motions or bills, but I support the concepts because I'm defending democracy. Won't say it. The previous guy at least had, some gumption. It's so disappointing for grassroots Canadians to watch this. It's actually disappointing to see so many of my fellow churchgoers who are going out to support the Liberals and the NDP in the election campaign. It's just as disappointing to see the same people voting for pro-abortion conservatives. We got a call in Florida, widow of an MP, pro-life MP. How'd she get my name? I don't know. My number. I'd had lunch with her and her husband a month before he died up in Ottawa. She said, you have to drop this qualifying candidates on abortion and euthanasia. You just have to get everybody to vote conservative. Even if they're not pro-life, get everybody to vote conservative to get rid of Justin Trudeau. I said, look, we've been working for 40 years telling people to elect pro-life candidates, to vote for pro-life candidates. If you have a CHP candidate in your riding that's running, the CHP is 100% pro-life. If you know of a candidate, Clayton Lee was just telling me that he and his wife have a pro-life candidate to vote for this year. And so does their son down in Oakville. Highly unusual, but they're so happy about it. So many people that I know have taken a blue ballpoint pen into the voting booth and written across it, no pro-life Liberal, or no pro-life Conservative, or no pro-life NDP. And you say, well, that's counted as a spoiled ballot. Yeah, guess what? They go back, these inside scrutineers go back to party headquarters then to tally the whole vote. And they said, well, how was it? Well, about 12 people wrote no pro-life Conservative. And we lost in this riding, in this particular poll, we've only lost by 8 votes. We would have won that if you had come out and said what you really are. But they're all frightened. Everybody's watching for, okay, when does my pension kick in? And that's it. Absolutely appalling. Been watching this for years and years, and part and parcel of the whole thing. Watching a time when we had a majority of the pro-life candidates who were Liberal Party candidates. Not too long ago. So what's happened? Everybody's been cowed and they're afraid to speak. I don't know why all the church leaders didn't come out and condemn the government for bringing in these new laws on voting. They shut us up 2 months before the writ went down. Because we were still successful once the writ went, up until the time the writ went down, they said, move it back 2 months. So that's what they did. But you have to have hope. You gotta have hope, miles and miles and miles of hope. Or somebody else would say, lots and lots of rope. But the reality is, I met a man called Dr. Bernard N. Nathanson. He, along with Larry Laidler and Betty Friedan, started the abortion movement in the United States. And when he died as a practicing Catholic. He had moved that far. And what changed him? The reality of seeing the child in the womb through the ultrasound. And the second thing was people like Judy Brown of American Life League and Nellie Gray from the March for Life. And they were so strong, and they were praying for him. And one day in New York City, working at St. Luke's Hospital, he stumbled into St. Patrick's Cathedral because it was so hot. He went to the first building he saw, and it was St. Patrick's Cathedral. And he went in there, got into the last pew, and this church service was going on, he told me. I said, oh yeah? He said, and at one point, this young couple in front of me turned to me and said, "The peace of Christ, Dr. Nathanson." They knew who I was. They knew I was an abortionist. And these people are wishing me the peace of this Christ. So they stumbled out of the place. All of those things affected him. And who were these people? Grassroots pro-lifers, just like all of us. The late, great Mother Teresa spoke to me on Parliament Hill in the mid-'80s at a rally, and she said, "Mr. Hughes," and I said, "Yes, Mother." And she said, "The beautiful thing about the pro-life movement is that it's ordinary people doing extraordinary things for God." I said, yeah, you're right. The real heroes of the Canadian pro-life movement, with the exception probably of Mary Wagner and Linda Gibbons, have been all of you. So when you want to see one of the pro-life heroes in Canada, turn on the light in your bathroom tomorrow morning and take a good look. There you are. And we're not going to give up. Absolutely not. Richard John Newhouse said when they put the lid down and tighten the screws after God's called you, yeah, that's a good time to stop. But in the meantime, here are some positive things. So many organizations today are trying to defund Planned Parenthood, the world's largest abortion referral agency, and in many cases in the United States now one of the largest abortion providers. Archbishop Pocock in 1973, the Roman Catholic Archbishop of Toronto, said to his pastoral council made up of 26 lay people, "I'd like to defund Planned Parenthood. I want to remove Catholic Charities from the United Way campaign." And people said to him, "Why? Planned Parenthood sounds like a normal name. What's wrong with that?" He said, "The world's largest abortion referral agency." So all members of the Archdiocesan Pastoral Council, all those lay people supported him. A vote was taken unanimous. I said to him, "How did the priest council vote on this?" And he drew on his cigar and smiled and said, "They weren't supportive of my action." They weren't supportive of his action, but the lay people were. The power is still where it should be. It's God's power that he gives to each and every one of us to go and do whatever. The Holy Spirit travels with us to everything. You want to go to Life Chain tomorrow? I don't want to go out there because I don't want my neighbors to see. You go out there anyway and you say your prayers while you're there. People come by and they argue in the car and say, I didn't know you were for abortion. Well, I had an abortion, you know, and the whole discussion starts. At one point a few years ago, we determined that over 100,000 people in Canada had seen those signs during that 1 hour on Sunday afternoon. Remember, could you not watch 1 hour with me? Absolutely powerful. And as long as you're praying all the time, I addressed 30 Baptist pastors 2 years ago in April. And I said, spirituality is at the core of everything we do. And one of them came up to me afterwards and says, what if the core is rotten? Each and every one of us has got to carry the message. We got to carry it to our pastors and our churches, no matter which community you belong to, and no matter what kind of flack you get, you continue to do it in a respectful, prayerful way and encourage them to speak. I just read a column by Joe Campbell in the interim newspaper today, and he's talking about somebody that was pro-abortion that became pro-life, and it wasn't because the person heard a homily or a sermon. It was because of interaction with other people. So that's what it takes in all of this. And my late friend, Father Ted Colleton, said try to do it with a little bit of humor. Even with Henry Morgentaler, I met him the last time in person on a birthday. People in the office had taken me out to a local restaurant. I'll tell you, it was Spadina Gardens. I wouldn't have told you before because you could never get a seat there. It's gone now. So I went in there, and there he is, sitting there at the next table. Place is packed. And he came over and said, how are you doing? I should know you. I said, yeah, Jim Hughes, Campaign Life. How are you doing, Henry? I got old man problems and whatnot. I introduced him to my seatmates. And as he was leaving, I said, hey, Henry. When he turned and smiled, I said, don't forget. And he said, I know. I said, I'm still praying for you. Now, before Henry's birthday, March the 19th, I had Catholics do a novena, a 9-day novena, series of prayers over 9 days for Henry Morgentaler on his birthday, because it happened to coincide with the feast of St. Joseph, who is the patron saint of Canada. When it became public knowledge that the Quebec government was sending late-term abortions to George Tiller the Killer in Wichita, Kansas, Henry Morgentaler got a media release out before I could get one out, saying that it was tantamount to baby killing. I terminate pregnancies before they become human beings, but you know, that doesn't make any sense. Nevertheless, he had moved that far that the same man that did late-term abortions in the early days no longer did them and believed that was tantamount to baby killing. So we all know the power of prayer. God doesn't listen to my prayer. I hear people say, well, yeah, he hears your prayer, but the answer you're going to get may not be the one you want. I find that every day when I say my prayers in the morning before I start to work, I take the anvil off, and he takes it from me. He says, there, Jim, I got it now. I say, thank you, God. And he says, now go and do the best you can, and away I go. I always remember a little presentation that Jackie Jeffs made years ago about all these people were just straining and calling on God. Finally, they said, God, we've been trying to move this boulder. It's too large. We can't do it. And he said, I know you can't do it. I asked you to try. Pip, there, I moved it. Yeah. Thank you for trying. So that's what this is all about. We've enjoyed this battle, and we're not giving up. And no matter what, can you imagine Royce Dunn deciding one day, you know, it would be great if we had signs around a highway intersection telling people that abortion was wrong. Now it's everywhere. It's all over the world. Can you imagine David B. Wright saying, you know, if we had prayer and fasting and called it something like 40 days for life, I wonder how that would go over. Well, you know how it goes over. They don't like it, but too bad. Abby Johnson on Parliament Hill in May said, you got to get tougher. Don't go away and hide when I'm too old to do that now. I got news for you. I wrote a letter to the editor. Didn't appear. I thought it was a pretty good letter, so I phoned the editor and said, I sent this letter in to you and it didn't appear. And he went and found it and said, it'll appear. Strange things, you see, because people making decisions without telling anybody else. We've had parliamentarians who thought their staff was on side and they were pro-abortion. And these are pro-life members of Parliament. The late Elsie Wayne, who was a terrific woman, she said, oh, my staff will take care of it. I said, your staff's not on side. They're on the other side. Oh, no, I'm not. I'm sure they're not. I'll ask Mr. Clark, Joe Clark. He's a reverend Roman Catholic. I said, he's a pro-abort. Oh, are you sure? I'm going to talk to the bishop down in St. John, New Brunswick, and see what he says. Mr. Hughes, the bishop, Bishop Troy, said, with all those Catholic politicians in the church, he said, Elsie, although you're not a Catholic, you're the most Catholic of all those politicians. Yep, because she tried all the time. You know, it's really fascinating to watch everything unfold here. I didn't think it was going to get this bad, but it's pretty bad, all right. And the different things that have happened with Father Ted Colleton, for instance, with Bernie Nathanson. Father Ted said, you got to keep your shoulder to the wheel all the time. Which reminded me, my wife wanted me to pick up tickets for river dance. You know that dance, like Irish dancing and everything? So I went down and lined up, and they only had tickets for a Wednesday matinee, and I could only get 2 tickets, and our daughters wanted to go too, but couldn't get more than 2. So we went to the afternoon river dance, and it was very good. And at halftime, at intermission, the lights came on, and people got up and went to get a drink. My wife went out too. And I once mentioned before, my wife went out to get a bottle of wine, and she scolded me. But since she's not here today, I can say it again. But there was an elderly lady sitting beside me, and probably in her 90s, and I said, oh, there's an empty seat beside you. Isn't it too bad you didn't know of somebody that could have come with you? My daughters tried to come, but there was no room left. And she said it was my late husband, Abner. And I said, oh, my heavens, that's too bad. He loved river dance. I said, don't you have any family or friends that could have come today? And she said, oh, loads of them, but they're all at his funeral. God said to Moses, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, etc. He didn't say, thou shalt not commit adultery except when your wife's out of town visiting her sister, or when your husband's out of town on business, or you shall not steal unless your employer isn't paying you the right amount of money, or your employee has been cheating you, etc., etc. He didn't say, thou shalt not kill after 13 days gestation or something like that. And that's what seems to be happening with those people who don't have the faith, that don't believe that God's in charge, and they're scrambling for something. You've probably already all heard once upon a time about Mother Teresa answering a woman who was concerned that she was dying and she hadn't stopped abortion. And she said to Mother Teresa, I haven't been successful. And people misinterpret what Mother Teresa then answered. She said, God doesn't hold you to be successful. He holds you to be faithful. That's what you gotta be. You gotta be faithful to the cause all the way through. And if you decide in your own mind, well, it's up to me, not God, I'm gonna say, we gotta start somewhere. Why don't we start at 13 days gestation, 13 weeks gestation, or 15 weeks or something? You're playing right into the hands of the enemy. We got to stand tough. We can't give up. We got to keep focusing on who the leader of this is, and it's not me, nor my successor, or Jackie, or her would-be successor when that person comes along. The good Lord will direct you as long as you pray to Him and say, what is it you want me to do? And He'll help you find what it is that you should do. When somebody comes canvassing to your door for a candidate, you might just ask them, well, for instance, an NDPer came to my door and I said, no, I couldn't vote for the NDP anymore. You have the blood of the babies on your hands. And she, what? I said, you got the blood of the babies on your hands. You're for abortion. Oh, not me personally. I said, yeah, you. You're trying to elect this candidate who's going to vote for killing children before birth. Oh, I never thought of that. And off she went. Somebody else told me similar stories about liberal people coming to the doors. So engage them. Don't yell at them. Don't be nasty. Be Christ-like in your approach to them, And believe it or not, it'll cause a lot of them to think about what they're doing. I always worked for the NDP because my family was NDP. I always voted Liberal because my family was Liberal. You know, on and on and on with this stuff. And support your pastors, because they get, heck, once I was invited to come and speak in my church. It was the first time in the last 22 years that anybody spoke about abortion there. And the reason they asked me is they were afraid of the backlash. So you got to support them all the time. Don't ever give up. You know, in order for pro-life legislation to be enacted in this country, former MP Tom Wappel and I wrote a pamphlet. He'd been a member of Parliament here for 19 years. We wrote a pamphlet on what it will take to change the law. First of all, you have to win the nominations in each of the ridings, 338 of them. You got to win those nominations of pro-life people that you put forward. But if the party doesn't want them because they're pro-life, as we've seen in this election on many occasions, then you're stymied. You're up against it. But if you get a majority of those people elected and they go to Parliament Hill and there's a vote on an issue, on this issue that's a strong pro-life resolution, then the party in power decides whether this will be a votable item. But before that, it goes off to a team of lawyers who take a look at how you've worded the legislation, and they may try to change it. Then you have to fight like heck to make sure that they don't lose the intent of what you're asking for. So now a committee sits, and they determine whether this will be a votable item or not. If the party in power is not on side, then it's going to get shot down. The member can bring forward then, if it's a private member's bill or motion, that member can bring forward for 1 hour debate in the House of Commons that particular bill or motion. But it can't be voted on. Let's say that it can be voted on. Let's say that it passes the House of Commons and it goes on to the Senate. But the Senate's made up of people that aren't on our side. The Prime Minister appoints members to the Senate. So we have to have some pro-life prime ministers to be able to appoint pro-life people to the upper house. And then if you got a majority of them, then it goes off to the Supreme Court. And do we have any friends on the Supreme Court? No. But if we have several pro-life prime ministers in there who make those appointments to people that are not judicial activists, but who will apply the law as it was meant, then we can enact legislation. Unfortunately, in the last 5 years, a number of new pro-life groups have come out looking for shortcuts to all this. There aren't any. There are no shortcuts. This is the way it's got to go. And how do we do it? Only each one of us individually taking our responsibility in our ridings to do it. But the pro-life movement is not just about politics. It's about a changing of hearts. And that changing of hearts comes from each one of us working individually with those people that come across our paths. Somebody said to me in a senior's home, well, how do you stop euthanasia? I said, well, if I could talk to all your relatives and friends, I'd say to them, you can stop euthanasia. Go in and visit your relatives and friends in the nursing home so they don't feel abandoned. If every person took responsibility for all the people in the nursing homes and whatnot, when you walk in the door, there are these people at the front door in wheelchairs and whatnot hoping to see a familiar face. Stop and say hello. Hi, how are you doing? How are you? How are you? My wife will tell me we were visiting one lady And as we were trying to get on the elevator, another one came in to tell me her life story. So Ginny left on the elevator, and I saw her about 20 minutes later after this resident told me her whole life story. But you have to just be there, open and prepared to talk to people, and that makes a difference. Then they don't look for euthanasia or assisted suicide because somebody cares. I know of a guy that died. I was at his funeral, went to the funeral home, and a nurse, one of his nurses was there, and she said to me, do you know so-and-so? And I said, yeah. She said, the man that died kept postcards from this man that were sent from all over the place. He sent him postcards and signed Jean Chrétien, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, Brian Mulroney, whatever. And the man laughed like heck. He couldn't speak any longer, but he laughed, and he kept them in a pouch. And she said when he died, we found over 100 postcards in his pouch, and he looked forward to receiving those. Was it a big deal for the person that sent them? Not a bit. But was it a big deal to the recipient? Absolutely. So little things like that. In Florida, in March, I sent some St. Patrick's Day cards to some Irish folks, and having listened to their reactions, Ginny had an aqua fit, and a woman's daughter came over and said, that card you sent my mother caused her to laugh and laugh. She's still laughing about it. It was sent months earlier. Little things like that. Isn't it embarrassing that we all can't do more of that? But it's actually important that we do. I heard reference to Professor Liley and Jerome Lejeune and whatnot. I had the privilege of meeting them in the 1970s here at the Tiniest Humans Conference. Wonderful people who left us a great legacy. Mother Teresa, Vernie Nathanson, Judy Brown, Father Paul Marks, Dr. Jack Wilkie. All of these people we've been associated with here in Canada, and we've taken the best that they had to offer to us in suggestions on how to improve, and it's been great. I'm looking here for some, you know, when I was an altar boy years and years ago, I saw in the church bulletin a little thing, and it said, I waited patiently for somebody to do something. And then I realized that I was somebody. Each and every one of us created in the image and likeness of God. We have to go out and try to do what He wants us to do. John Paul the Great invited us to join as NGOs at the United Nations over 20 years ago. And there we found that there was a push by other NGOs to bring in abortion as an international human right, and special rights for homosexuals and lesbians, and a policy to depopulate the earth. So we came back from those meetings, and we sent letters to all the Roman Catholic bishops in Canada and to other faith communities as well. Lukewarm reception. Warned them as the years went on over all these things that were going to happen if they didn't act, and nobody acted. And now we see Donald Trump vilified by many here in Canada, how terrible he is, and yet he and 18 other leaders of countries came out saying this week there is no international right to abortion. Unbelievable. And he's pushing forward, asking for more countries to join them. So when Trump was elected, how many people actually thought that Donald Trump would probably go down as the most pro-life president in the United States history? Yeah. Nobody would have. And when the people said to me, what do you think about Clinton and Trump running for president, I said it's the worst field ever presented to the American people that I can ever remember. Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And yet, look at the results. And I'm hearing everybody praying for Donald Trump. I don't hear everybody praying for Justin Trudeau or Andrew Scheer. I saw Andrew Scheer's father on Monday. We were at a meeting together in Ottawa. I said, how are you holding up under all this? Because everybody taking shots at him because of his son. And he said, do you have children, Jim? I said, yes, of course. And he said, do your children always listen to you? I said, no. Enough said, and then we moved on from there. But I would suggest that perhaps if we prayed a little bit harder for all these people, it would be much better for all of us if we could do that. Remember what Abby Johnson set up on Parliament Hill? And young people in our office said, oh, Mr. Hughes, you must be used to this now. No. What did you think of Abby Johnson's film? I said, I didn't see it. You didn't? I said, no. Why? I says, because it bothers me each time, and it didn't get better over 40 years. Each time I see it, it hurts as much as I saw it the first time. But for everybody else, that's great, go for it. Abby, I first met in a tent in Washington, D.C., in an EWTN tent, waiting to be interviewed by Teresa Tomeo from Detroit, Michigan. And I said, hi, I'm Jim Hughes from Canada. And she said, oh, I'm Abby Johnson. I said, oh, hi, Abby, what do you do? Well, I used to work for Planned Parenthood. I said, oh, that's interesting. What are you doing here, Abby? And she said, I'm on your side now. I said, no, you're on somebody else's side now, Abby. You're stuck. And Abby was stuck. And thank God for her. She's doing great work here. I'm looking to see, there was a couple of other things I should bring up. My kids and my grandchildren come for Christmas dinner at our house. And so two of the younger kids said to me, Grandpa, can we have a cat for Christmas? And I said, well, I traditionally cook a turkey, but I'll try. Yes, I know, it's all right. And there's something else I was about to bring up too, that Bernie Nathanson, 1983 in Toronto. Future historians will judge this society to be one of the most brutal in the history of mankind because of abortion. This is a guy that started it. That started the push for legalization of it. And remember, in Canada, abortion's been decriminalized. And those politicians that claim to be pro-life, that want to bring in some legislation that allows for killing of children up to 13 weeks gestation, they would be responsible as the authors of pro-abortion legislation. That's the reality of what's going on. And you can't get around the hard work that's necessary to do this. And Jackie, I applaud you for being such a solid defender for so long. And you can articulate things much easier than I can, because I just get angry, and you're able to think through it all. So God bless you, and thank you very much.